The year 1598 was a turning point in the history of East Asia, marking the final chapter in a war that had raged for years between the Kingdom of Joseon and the invading forces of Japan. For 7 long years, Japan's mighty military under the leadership of Toyotomi Hideyoshi had attempted to conquer Joseon, sweeping across the land with an unrelenting tide of soldiers, ships, and cannons. The Japanese forces seemed unstoppable until they met their match in one of history's greatest naval commanders, Admiral Yi Sun-sin. The Battle of Noryang, fought on the waves of the narrow Noryang Strait, would not only mark the end of the Japanese invasions, but also immortalize the legacy of Admiral Yi, whose brilliance, courage, and leadership would forever shape the future of Korea. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the East Sea, the Noryang Strait appeared deceptively calm. This narrow passage of water, nestled between the Korean peninsula and the Japanese archipelago, would soon become the site of one of the most decisive naval battles in history. On the deck of his flagship, the legendary Turtle Ship, stood Admiral Yi Sun-sin, surveying the horizon with steely determination. The ominous sight of Japanese warships loomed in the distance, a reminder that the final confrontation had come. Yet, he stood resolute, knowing that this battle would be his last, a final act of defiance against an enemy who had already ravaged his land and caused immeasurable suffering. Yi's name would go down in history as synonymous with military brilliance. His tactical genius had already been proven in previous engagements such as the Battle of Hansen Island and the Battle of Myeongnyang, where he had defied overwhelming odds to achieve victory. His methods were unconventional, but they always played to his strengths: agility, speed, and surprise. He had led his forces through these earlier trials with unmatched skill, earning the respect of his peers and the fear of his enemies. Yet, the Battle of Noryang would be his final test. It was a culmination of years of hardship, sacrifice, and personal loss. Despite the crushing weight of the war on his shoulders, he was determined to protect his people and secure a future for his nation. The origins of the war lay in the ambitions of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Japan's warlord and unifier. In the late 16th century, Hideyoshi sought to expand his empire by first conquering Joseon, the neighboring kingdom of Korea. What began as a small-scale invasion quickly escalated into a full-blown war, drawing in forces from the Ming dynasty of China, which had come to the aid of Joseon. The Japanese, under Hideyoshi's command, initially dominated the battlefield, overrunning much of Korea and causing widespread destruction. But the war would not be decided by numbers alone. The Joseon kingdom, though ravaged by the invasion, was not without its champions. The people of Joseon fought fiercely, led by men like Admiral Yi Sun-sin, whose unparalleled knowledge of naval warfare and strategy would prove to be the key to their survival. While the Japanese boasted larger, more heavily armed warships, Yi's fleet of smaller, faster vessels was the true strength of the Joseon Navy. Among these ships, none was more feared than the Turtle Ship, a vessel with an ironclad hull and spikes protruding from its deck, designed specifically for close combat. The Turtle Ship would become the symbol of Yi's naval genius and his unyielding resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. Admiral Yi Sun-sin's greatest strength lay not just in his leadership, but in his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his opponents. His understanding of naval tactics was so profound that even his enemies would eventually recognize him as a force to be reckoned with. Yi's knowledge of the geography of the region, particularly the Noryang Strait, gave him a strategic advantage that the Japanese were unaware of. He spent hours poring over maps, studying the local currents, tides, and terrain. To Yi, the Noryang Strait was more than just a narrow waterway. It was a choke point, a natural trap that could neutralize the Japanese fleet's superior numbers and firepower. But Yi was not naive. He understood that the Japanese would not be easily trapped. Their fleet was formidable, boasting experienced generals and sailors who had already proven their mettle in previous battles. The Japanese navy outnumbered Yi's forces by more than 2-1, and their warships were heavily armed with cannons and long-range weaponry. Nevertheless, Yi knew that his smaller, more maneuverable ships could outfight the invaders if they were positioned correctly. He devised a plan that would take advantage of the narrow waters of the Noryang Strait, where the Japanese would be unable to use their numbers and firepower to full effect. At dawn, the battle began. The Japanese fleet, a massive array of warships lined up across the horizon, moved forward with the confidence of a superior force. They were ready to charge into the strait, believing their numbers would overwhelm the defending Joseon navy. But Admiral Yi had anticipated their movements. His fleet, though smaller, had already taken up position in the narrow strait, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the Japanese ships advanced, Yi's forces moved into action. The sound of cannon fire rang out across the waters as the Joseon ships closed in. Yi's tactics were precise and deliberate. His ships were quick, maneuverable, and armed with cannons that could fire from a distance. The turtle ships, their ironclad hulls reinforced with spikes, crashed into the Japanese ships, sending shockwaves through their ranks. The Japanese were caught off guard by the ferocity and speed of the Joseon navy. Despite their superior numbers, they found themselves boxed in by Yi's well-coordinated forces. As the battle intensified, the Japanese fleet struggled to maintain formation. The narrow waters of the strait hindered their movements, and Yi's forces capitalized on every opportunity. The Joseon ships were agile, darting in and out of the battle, picking off the Japanese warships one by one. It was clear that Yi's tactics were taking their toll on the enemy. But the battle was far from won. The Japanese forces, though disorganized, still had formidable generals leading their troops, and they were determined to break free from the trap. They attempted to regroup and push back against Yi's forces, but every move they made was countered by Yi's brilliance. It was a battle of wits and will, one that would ultimately test the limits of human endurance and resolve. In the midst of the chaos, tragedy struck. As Yi Sun-sin was directing the movements of his fleet, a bullet from a Japanese sharpshooter found its mark. The man who had been the symbol of hope and strength for his people fell to the deck of his ship. The news of his injury spread quickly among the Joseon forces, and for a moment, it seemed as though the tide of the battle might turn in favor of the Japanese. But even in his dying moments, Yi's leadership remained unbroken. With his final words, he urged his officers to continue the fight. "Do not let my death stop you from achieving victory," he said. Even as the blood poured from his wound, he refused to abandon his men. His resolve was unshaken, and his presence on the battlefield continued to inspire his forces to fight on. Though mortally wounded, he continued to direct the battle from his flagship. His officers rallied to his side, and his example gave them the courage to press on. The Joseon forces, spurred on by their commander's unwavering determination, pushed the Japanese fleet back. The tide of the battle slowly began to turn in favor of Yi's forces. As the sun began to set over the Noryang Strait, the Japanese fleet was in retreat. Their once proud warships had been either sunk or disabled, and the remnants of their forces were scattered across the waters. The battle had been a victory for the Joseon Navy, but it was a bittersweet one. Admiral Yi Sun-sin, the architect of this triumph, had paid the ultimate price for his country's survival. He died on the deck of his ship, surrounded by the sounds of battle and the roar of cannon fire. The Battle of Noryang marked the end of the Japanese invasions of Korea. The victory was decisive, but the loss of Yi Sun-sin was felt deeply by his people. Yet his legacy lived on. The victory at Noryang proved that with the right leadership and strategy, even a smaller, less powerful force could overcome overwhelming odds. The Joseon Navy, under Yi's leadership, had defeated one of the most powerful military forces of the time. In the years that followed, Yi Sun-sin's name became synonymous with courage, strategy, and sacrifice. His leadership during the Battle of Noryang was not just a tactical victory, it was a victory of the human spirit. He had shown that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, courage, resilience, and strategic thinking could change the course of history. His name became a symbol of hope for the people of Korea, a reminder that they could fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. Today, Admiral Yi Sun-sin is celebrated as one of Korea's greatest heroes. Monuments have been erected in his honor, and his legacy is enshrined in the hearts of his people. The Battle of Noryang, though fought more than 400 years ago, remains a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of leadership in times of crisis, and the indomitable will of a people fighting for their freedom. As we reflect on the events of the Battle of Noryang, we are reminded that the outcomes of great battles are often shaped not just by the strength of armies, but by the courage and wisdom of those who lead them. Admiral Yi Sun-sin's triumph over overwhelming odds stands as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of certain defeat, courage and strategy can change the course of history. This was more than just a battle. It was the survival of a nation and the immortal legacy of a hero who gave everything for his people. Yi Sun-sin's story is a lesson for all time. It reminds us that, in the face of adversity, the most powerful weapon we possess is not just the strength of our armies, but the strength of our leadership and the determination of our will. The Battle of Noryang will forever stand as one of the greatest examples of courage, strategy, and sacrifice in the annals of military history.